Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to New York Times bestseller Laurie Frankel about her new book, Enormous Wings.
I
love it. I love that cover, Laurie. That is amazing.
They did an amazing job with this cover. Look how beautiful. They did an amazing job with this cover. Yeah. I had nothing to do with it. The credit is all Holt. They did such a super job.
They did indeed. So Laurie's pitch came to me, and it's I'll give a little tiny bit of the pitch, and then I'll ask you to explain to the audience what Enormous Wings is about. So I told Laurie before we started recording that I like reading older characters. And so the pitch was about an older woman who finds herself in a predicament, which Laurie will explain in a minute, and then the hilarity and the tears that ensued afterwards. So I just loved everything about this book, Laurie. So give the audience a pitch about what Enormous Wings is about.
I would love to. Dan, this is really nice of you. Thank you so much for your kind words and for having me. I'm so glad to be here having this conversation. Yes, this is my book, Enormous Wings. It's about a 77-year-old grandma named Pepper Mills who, in the first pages of the book, rear-ends a priest, and her children decide she can't have her license anymore, therefore she can't have her car anymore, therefore she can't have her house anymore, therefore they make her move into a retirement community against her will and better judgment. But when she gets there, she's surprised and delighted to make good friends and even fall in love. And that's going great. But then she falls ill. And when she goes to the doctor, what she finds out is that she's not sick, she's pregnant.
At 77. Oh, wow.
At 77, correct. That's the pitch.
And I didn't want to spoil that for the audience because I knew you would give it. But it was one of those things that when your publicist sent that to me, I was like, holy cow, this is inventive, you know? I had Deanna Rayburn on last year for Killers of a Certain Age. And that's about 4 retired assassins who come back into the game. And I just loved that. I mean, you know, as we age, different things don't work as well as it used to. But if we're fortunate, we still have our mind. And our mind is the most important functioning part of our body.
Right, exactly. As we age, some things doesn't work as well as they used to, and some things work better than they used to. This is a question of figuring out which is which and how you use the latter to compensate for the former, which in lots of ways is exactly what this book is about.
Yes, it is. So it's also about, it's a love story and maybe even a bit of a cautionary tale about feminism. And cautionary tale being the sort of my choice of terms, because I don't need anybody to tell me to be a feminist. I already am one. And I love reading about female heavy characters who are strong and strong-willed and stuff like that. And you did this in Pepper. I mean, so was Pepper the first character that came to you, or was the setting the first thing, or what drew you to create Pepper?
Yes, Pepper was the first thing that came to me. And I agree with you. Like, me too. I don't need to make or read an argument for feminism. I feel like it doesn't, but it should go without saying. And and strong female characters should be the norm. They're not, but they should be. So that's not the argument I want to make. I want to start with that as a given and then see what happens when you put them, these strong women, into ridiculous and untenable situations. And in this case, she is disempowered in part because she is a woman, but mostly because she's an old woman. And you know, and this is why the book kicks off with this. I mean, lots of people get in minor fender benders, but if you're an old lady, then you get in a minor fender bender and you have to give up all of your decision-making power and all of your autonomy, and and really control over almost all aspects of your life. And that's not fair. She's quite strong, she's quite smart, she's entirely capable. And so really that's what this book is about, is this journey from disempowerment to finding that power again. And it doesn't look like it looked when she was 25, and it didn't look like it looked when I was 25, or when my kid will be 25. Some of it is that she's lived a long time, and things change, but some of it is simply that we treat people, as you say, differently when they get older, and she's not here for that. She don't stand for that.
No, she's not. And I love the fact that you gave her a name that stands out, Pepper Mills, which is, if you have something unique about your name, when you're younger, people make fun of it. When you're older, people just sort of roll their eyes. They're thinking, oh, Jesus Christ, Pepper Mills. But I just loved that. I thought that was such a brilliant use of comedic timing on your part.
Thank you. I work really hard on names because as a reader, it drives me crazy when I can't keep track of characters because I can't remember their names. In this case, it was just a little bit of added character development, really,
Right.
because her point is that she had a perfectly reasonable name, and then she got married in her 20s to a man whose last name was Mills, and now her name is a pun forevermore, and she's stuck with it. And her point is now she wouldn't have to change her name, but at the time, 50 years ago, she didn't know any women who didn't change their names. So she married this guy and had to make a mockery of her own name. Since then, she's decided to divorce him. But since then, her children have decided to move her into the same retirement community with this guy, because their point is very much like, well, we already looked for a retirement community. We don't want to do it again. Why don't you just go live with Dad? And her point is, I already decided not to live with Dad a long time ago. And their point is like, oh, it's big. Probably you won't run into each other, which, spoiler alert, they run into each other.
Of course they do.
Of course
they have to, don't they? I mean, they really do have to. And Roger, I will say, as an author, you gave Roger to we readers who I would imagine most everybody's going to despise Roger at the beginning of the book, just because he and Pepper have split up. And I think if someone doesn't fall in love with Pepper, there's something wrong with him. They need to see a therapist badly, because I think you've imbued Pepper with all of those motherly and grandmotherly traits that are so beautiful in women as they age. And then, of course, the fact that Roger couldn't get his life together well enough for Pepper to stay with him, you sort of dislike him. But I will say you redeemed Roger towards the end of the book. Great on doing that.
Yes. Because I think there's so much, like, really it is a book about the gray areas of life, the things that are complicated. And that is certainly one of them. She loved him for a while, and then she didn't for a while. And that doesn't mean that she can't love him in a different way later. And and if you're lucky, life is long and relationships change. He's a good foil for her. And in fact, one of the things about Roger, I think, is that he drives us crazy. Like, he drives her crazy, but he also clearly gets her, as we do, and we have to give him that. And she has to give him that. Yeah.
Well, yes, and I agree, and I think that that's something that you did so masterfully, because towards the end, Roger is not a bad guy. Their situation wasn't long term enough, or it didn't go. I have a friend of mine that he and his partner have been together almost 30 years. And I said to him, you guys must have a lot of similarities. And he said, no, quite the opposite. It's like, we don't even like the same movies. He said, but we grew at the same pace. We grew apart, but we grew at the same pace, and it has made us stronger. He's like, if it's off balance, one grows and the other stays stagnant. He's like, that kind of relationship doesn't work. And so, I think towards the end, I had to give up my prejudice against Roger and just say, hey, look, their situation didn't work out, but they're still good people.
Yes, right. Yes, exactly. And we like him as a friend for her
Yes.
rather than a partner.
Yeah.
She has a much better partner, and she falls in love, and we're very happy, I think, for her about this. And so
Yes.
it's fine. Like Roger can be there being annoying, and it doesn't have to be like the only lasting misery is the name, really.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so let's talk a little bit about Moth.
Yes.
And why did you choose to make him British?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's such a good question. I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit this, but it's because all along in my head I had Mark Rylance in that role, as like a aspirational, not even casting, just kind of like that's who was in my brain while I was writing this. And so I leaned into that a little bit. That's such a good question. I'd completely forgotten about it. But I also think that really this book is about being a stranger in a strange land, and what that means at this late time in life. I think that so often that idea of like being the new kid or being different or being somewhere new is, how do I want to say that? It's like something that we think happens to you when you go to college or when
Yes,
you get
yes.
your first
Being
job, or
younger, right.
like you move away from home at 25 or something. But to be doing this as old people is the same and also different. And so, for her, it's happening in one way, and for him, it's different. He's a stranger. He's different. He stands out in different ways, in part just by being a male person in a retirement community.
Right.
And so I wanted to put it at the forefront so that you don't forget it, and so that it's like her first impression of him is that he is this, he's this charming British guy. And she watches BBC, as do we all. And she's like, oh yes, I recognize this from Masterpiece Mysteries.
Right.
And I loved that for both of them. It's easy to fall in love with the guys with British accents.
Totally agree with you on that. And sometimes it's the exoticness of it. So, there is one point in the book that I was really struck by something that Pepper says. She said she fell in love with Roger because he made her laugh, but that laughter wasn't enough to sustain a long-term relationship. And I thought, well, that was a very clever way for Pepper to look at her relationship. I mean, she's fictional, but she's real in my world. Laurie, Pepper is my new bestie. She and I
Oh,
go
I'm
on
so
lunch.
glad. Oh, that's really good. That's really good.
So now let's dive a little deeper into the feminism part of the
Okay.
book. And
Okay.
if you don't mind, because there are some decisions that have to be made about whether to extend the pregnancy or terminate it. And early on, Dr. Kim thinks the pregnancy will terminate itself because of Pepper's age. And I think that would be a fair assessment for most people who are aged. It is statistically that when a woman passes 40 or 50, the chances of giving birth become quite diminished. And here's Pepper at
Yeah.
77. So,
Right.
but then some decisions are made, and not on Pepper's from Pepper's point of view, so to speak. Other things happen, and I wonder, was that intentional on your part? And I mean, I know it was, but I mean, what part of that conversation did you as an author want to get into?
Yeah, right. It's such a good question. It's such a good and important question. I wrote this book the first time in 2017. And I mean I wrote it. Like
Okay.
I drafted it, I revised, I edited, I published, I wrote this book in 2017. And I just could not quite convince you that this character would do anything other than have an abortion in this situation. And I put it in a drawer and I wrote two more books. And I took it back out in 2023 when I turned 50. I was thinking about aging, I guess, and that sort of thing. And at that point in 2023, all I had to do was reset the book in Texas or any of the 13 other states where abortion had become illegal in the intervening 6 years. And that bridged that plot hole. unfortunately. It also refocused the book where it was meant to be all along, which was on these issues of agency and bodily autonomy and who we let make those decisions and who we don't and why, and all of the language surrounding that. You know, it was the idea, it was the metaphor that I went in with. It was just an unbridgeable plot hole until dumps and until it wasn't. Yeah, exactly.
That of course, I think I said while we were recording, I'm a huge feminist. So no human got on this earth without a mother being involved. So the fact that women's rights is not the number one issue on everyone's mind, it blows my mind, because I mean, everybody had a mother. And to try to limit a woman's ability to govern her own body is just unconscionable to me.
I know.
And I did love that aspect of this book, because we have to have these conversations, that we have to have real conversations, not just opinionated conversations. You know, everybody opinions are like ears. Everybody's got one unless they lost. And that was the clean version right there, Laurie. That's not what I usually say. I'm trying to make this family friendly today, you know, but
I mean, listen, not on my account. Yes, this is exactly right. Well, and I just also think that like one's position on abortion is something that is unlikely to change. And you know, people think what they think, and we've all heard all of the arguments already. And so your position on that is that the social media post. If we're going to have a conversation, though, then we can look at all of the grays. We can look at all of the things that we do agree on, or that we do disagree together on, or all of the surrounding issues, or all of the issues that come up when we pass this legislation, no matter what side of it we're on. And that, I think, is what novels suit up for. Like, to my mind, that's the whole point of a novel. If you want to tell me your position on abortion, that's a tweet. If you want to have a conversation, then that's 250 pages and, 7 hours of your time. And then, and then you can have a conversation. And that's the whole point. That's the whole idea here. And, one of the things that I thought was really interesting going into this is that there are a lot of very feminist, pro-choice people who would, however, have no problem saying to an elderly parent, like, look, I'm sorry, what you want doesn't matter. You're no longer capable of making your own decisions for your own body. You've got to go live in this other place. We have to put you in this home for your own good. You aren't able to make those decisions anymore. You're not safe in your own home. And that language mirrors quite a lot the language that we use around reproductive freedoms. And so that's really interesting to me. And it seems like, a place where we can find common ground. And one of the things that happens in this book is that both the pro-choice people and the anti-abortion people come for Pepper, and they want in on this, and they want her to represent their cause. And they are both wrong. Like, they both get taken to task. And I think that's my idea here is, let's talk about what we do have in common instead of always, always, always landing on what we don't and can never have in common.
Yeah, I have that issue with someone I know very well. She's a huge Trump supporter, and I am not a Trump supporter, but she has so many wonderful qualities about her as a human being, and I can't dismiss her. I don't ever talk to her about politics because I'm afraid I'm going to tell her how stupid I think she is. But I don't. As a human being, she doesn't seem to appear stupid. But that's me personally, and I'm like, wow, okay. And I don't like to argue, except with my best friend, who I don't like to not argue with. So, but it's one of those things that I like peacefulness, and I like to have a conversation about why these things are important to me or to Laurie Frankel, or not important to Laurie Frankel or Dan. It's important to get to know someone. You have to understand what they believe in.
Right. And we're so divided at the moment. There's so much that's so divisive. There's so much that we cannot come together on, that we ignore all of the stuff that we can come together on, and that we can have a conversation about, a discussion, a dialogue. And I just think that's why we read. So let's have more of that. And it, and it was why I went into this with this kernel of that is much harder to believe, let's say, than the rest of it. This like kernel of the miraculous surrounded by realism. That's why, because as long as it seems just a little bit beyond the bounds of possible, then you can talk about it.
Totally agree. So you gave a situation between Pepper and Lola that I'm curious, just out of my own blatant curiosity, have you gotten much pushback on that section? Which I don't.
The book,
you can discuss it if you want. I'm not going to tell it, but I mean,
yes, right. It's a little bit of a spoiler. It's definitely a spoiler.
Okay.
But the short answer to your question is the book has only been out for a week. So I don't think anybody has read it enough yet to be pissed off at me, which is really great. I feel like I'm living in this blissful time before people start yelling at me, which I feel like happens every book. At some point, people start yelling at me. Sometimes before the book comes out, just like based on pitch. But this one, I think the pitch wasn't that upsetting. It's like the ending of the book. And I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. Yeah. But really, to me, I mean, I really did not know how this book was going to end going into it at all. It took me a really long time to find the ending of this book. But what I did know was that Pepper starts at this place of being totally disempowered, and she has to make this journey to empowerment and to being in charge and to getting her her say back in her own life. And it took me a really long time to figure out how. So everybody has to read it, and hopefully it won't piss them off too much. But we'll see.
Not. And maybe it'll spark a dialogue, because we see what happens. And I'm not going to give the spoiler, but what happens is we see how life can be different and how it is different for a grandmother and her granddaughter, and even a mother and her 3 children, who could not be more dissimilar, those 3 kids, right. Which I loved that as well. And I love the twins. They're adorable.
Yes, I love to write children because they're so interesting. They at once don't know as much as adults because they haven't lived as long, and they know so much more than adults because they don't have all the society and the social stuff and the need to fit in and and make nice and get a job and all of that stuff. And so they're funny, so they're a delight on the page, I think. I think we talk a lot about mothers and daughters, maybe not enough, but a lot. I think we talk much less about grandmothers and granddaughters. So I was very close with both of my grandmothers. And, and I think that's that other side of what you're talking about. Like, we like to read about older characters, and we like to read about their relationship with younger characters. Yeah, and, this is another example of, like, she has this 15-year-old granddaughter she's very close with. And of course, her 15-year-old granddaughter can help her with things like emojis and how to use your phone and why Taylor Swift is great. But that doesn't mean that she's smarter. And it doesn't mean that Pepper is addled or, unable to live in the world. It just means that, like, the new operating system on the phone is stupid. That's fine. And I feel like differentiating that is good for everyone. Grandchildren, grandparents, everyone.
I totally agree. So I know that my latest Apple update said I got 8 new emojis. Was matzo ball one of them? I don't know.
I don't know either. That's a super question, to which I don't know. Sometimes I make these things up and they're aspirational. Like, I hope this is on my phone, but I don't know.
Oh my God. I was looking for one last year, and I don't even remember what it was I was looking for. I must have looked for nearly 30 minutes, and it turns out there isn't one. And I'm like, well, why isn't there one?
Yes, why isn't there one? Yes, right.
Roller skates and ice skates and boxing gloves, but no whatever it was I was looking for. I was like,
right.
Oh, okay. I see how this is. So.
Yes. Like, whose side are you on? Yeah,
that's
totally.
right. That's right. And I love the fact that even though Pepper Mills has had to put up with her name, she names her child something unique, and we're not going to tell that either, but I loved that. And I love that saying that the name comes from. I had another author on last year who is Australian, and that phrase figured in huge into his book. And I'm like, I don't understand it, but now I understand it a little more. But it was so
No one
cute.
understands it. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And her first three children, her daughters are named after their great grandmothers, which is, really very sweet. But then, and their names are Darcy and Alice. And so when the son comes along, her ex husband names him Max because he thinks "damn kids" is funny, and I do too.
Yes,
And mostly though, what I think is like, naming is free character development for the namer. It doesn't tell you anything about the character, but it tells you so much about the parent because, they are the kind of couple who would name their children Max so that it could be damn kids and they think that's funny. So like, great. Now you don't have to tell me anything else about those characters. I know everything I need to know.
absolutely. I told somebody recently my real name is Danny, not Daniel, because my mother thought Daniel sounded too stuffy. So she gave me the shortened version. And then when I turned in my early 20s, I interviewed for a job, and the guy says, "You're still going by your nickname?" I'm like, "That's not my nickname. That's my legal name." But I go by Dan now because it's easier to sign and it's shorter. So, but it's just one of those things. Laurie, I cannot tell you how very much I enjoyed Enormous Wings and our chat today. This has been such a great deal of fun for me.
Me too, Dan. This is such a great deal of fun. I just absolutely love this conversation.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outwithdan.com, on Twitter at outwithdan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.